Welcome back to Raised by Giants discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys and any moderators or channel members out there. We have a great show for everyone here this evening with returning guest Brian Burns from the HeroParanomal Podcast. But before I bring him on, a quick reminder that super chats and super stickers are available, and PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description and are a great way to help support the show and my work. And also, Ryder Ranger channel memberships are available and are also a great way to help support the show monthly. And if you become a Ryder Ranger channel member, you get access to bonus episodes, and a new channel members episode will be dropping soon, and you're not going to want to miss that one. So become a Ryder Rangers channel member today and help support the show monthly, and check the community tab page on the channel to get access to those episodes. So with that down, we have with us today returning guest, researcher, and the host of HeroParanomal Podcast, Ryan Burns. How's it going, my friend?
Hey man, always a blessing to talk to you and touch base and get into all the crazy stuff taking place.
Always wild stuff going on. But before we get into the some of the current things that are happening, have you ever heard of the Flatwoods Monster?
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting case there, and I just recently had heard about it whenever I went back to my hometown for the passing of my dad. We went to this. Me and my girlfriend, we went to this little shop there, and they had all the Flatwoods monster stuff. They had like Mothman stuff and like Bigfoot stuff, and I got these two magnets of the Flatwoods monster, and I was like, wow, this is a really interesting case. What do you know about it?
I think the craziest thing is basically just the appearance of the thing, right? It looks like it's wearing like this strange dress kilt thing. Just the experience with the kids and what they for being 1952, I think it was. These kids, I think it was 6 kids, completely, see this non-human entity that does not fit in any of the boxes of anything anybody has seen until that point. Oh yeah, show them the pictures are the best. I mean, it looks like this. I don't know, man. It seriously looks like something that you would see in like a really bad science fiction novel. You couldn't make something up worse looking. But it's interesting that the fact that they all collaborate this, and that the creature dragged like a lizard-like hand, they said, across the hood of the vehicle. It's crazy. It's one of my favorites because it's so wild.
It is really wild, and I think some people have equated it to being a large owl, but I don't think a large owl has a flaming head, does it? I've never seen an owl with a flaming head. That's what they kind of describe the being as, is like having like a flaming head. That's what the teardrop behind the face of the creature is like supposedly like a flame, or like it's lit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of esoteric looking if it really has like this flame behind its head or whatever that is. It's super reminiscent of like ancient texts or biblical texts, even, how they have that aura over the different entities. And being West Virginia, you have to wonder, even in the 50s, if there is government stuff, just to the east. So you have to wonder if they were just testing stuff out in the West Virginia countryside. But yeah, the creature, it seemed to have just this chimera-like factor about it, lizard-like arms that didn't really fit the body, a head that doesn't fit the body, this strange kilt dress-like thing, almost robotic in nature. It's crazy. If I was a kid, this would be horrific.
Yeah, and some of the eyewitness accounts said that it would like float, that it was like would like hover above
You
the ground at them and like fly at them.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the stuff the villagers in the Alto Nanay of Peru experienced, where it was about a meter off the ground, flying around, kind of looked like the Green Goblin. They said, about these quote unquote aliens, which may or may not be, we don't know. But yeah, when it comes to this legend, it's something that definitely caught a lot of traction because these kids, I mean, for being kids, they did not back down from the story, no matter how much people tried to corner them, dissuade them. And it turned into a national sensation, I think, at the time, and flying saucers were something that, unfortunately, mistakenly was also grabbing a lot of attention at the time.
Which was a misrepresentation and a misquote from Arnold. He never called the shape of the craft a flying saucer. He said that the craft flew like saucers across water. He never said that the shape of the craft was flying saucers, but that's what all the newspapers printed, and it's probably the biggest misquote of all time. But it's really interesting with West Virginia. Like there's so many different cryptids and different creatures like Indrid Coal, or some people call him Indrid Cold. Either way, you have that one. You have the Mothman. You have Bigfoot. You have the Flatwoods Monster. It seems like for some reason West Virginia is like a hub for these cryptid like creatures.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring Indrid into it because have you had a chance to speak with Greenfield, the author of the Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts, at all?
No, but I would like to.
Me too. Yeah, I've really wanted to talk to him because he came out with this like really thin little book, which is called the Complete Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts. And among the strange phenomenon within that book is this Indrid Cold character, this guy that keeps popping up right around these times. The guy pops up with the Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts, pops up in West Virginia, has connections to apparently Valiant Thor. I mean, it just goes on and on. This dude just keeps popping up. And it kind of reminds me of the Smiling Man, that creepy myth that is all over, all social media channels now. Have you seen this face? And it's a guy that looks like he's out of his mind with a creepy smile. But this had a lot to do with ufology back in the 50s. People would see this creepy guy with a strange smile, and these rumors circulated about the same character, Indrid Cold or Indrid Cole. And, it makes you wonder, was it just a government spook who got a bad rap, who was trying to disinform society and just happened to be, unfortunately, like a crisis actor at all these events? Or is it a very real phenomenon? And I think Alan Greenfield kind of provides some insight into that. But yeah, I would love to talk to him. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and also with the Men in Black, because the Men in Black were kind of spotted all around. The Men in Black's thumbprints are all over the Mothman sightings, and it makes you think because I'm pretty sure Indrid Cole is depicted wearing like a black suit. He's like always smiling, and I'd have to refresh on the story, but I think that he spoke telepathically to the first person that he encountered close to Parkersburg, West Virginia, before the Mothman sightings.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
gentleman stopped his car in the middle of the highway or something, and then there was like a craft in the middle of the highway. I might be getting the story confused, but
No, you're 100%. This dude just keeps and it's one of those things where you're like, BS, and you start looking into it, and the more you look into it, the more it pops up. It's like one of those thorns in your side. I think it's popped up with Hellier. It pops up with Kenneth Grant, Aleister Crowley, some ties to high strangeness in, anyway, all kinds of other things. and you have this character, and I don't know, man. It seems as if he is very much along the lines of that Men in Black, not quite human. It reminds me a lot of what you hear a lot of the quote unquote tip of the capstone of ufology these days, as far as intelligence and what they say to many who they've drawn a lot of attention by saying, that they walk among us, and they have for some time. And this has been met with all kinds of different forms of attack, laughter, comedy, but yeah, there seems to be this advanced working group in the government, in ufology circles, and in the private sector, which are under the impression that these not quite human entities walk among us. And from time to time, they have a hard time kind of pulling off the fitting in aspect of humanity. And I think this character is one of them. And you find, I don't know, you find all kinds of instances where, in Vegas, for example, there's a very prevalent rumor, and I've heard this from casino workers. I heard it from the late John Lear. I've heard it from other people, and it's basically that these things like to go to public places from time to time, and that sometimes they sort of glitch out, or they don't know how to socially interact with humans, and it can turn into quite the mess. And there was a story. I spoke with a B&B owner in Green River, Utah, where the Green River Launch Complex used to be, which was like a super secretive, sort of like White Sands, like this launch complex that eventually was completely abandoned. And it's just weird why it was there. But this B&B owner said that, for being abandoned from time to time, she believed that these military semi trucks and other military trucks would come in and utilize underground facilities at this launch complex for various reasons. And that from time to time, when this would take place, they would see these strange people, and I've been out there. It's like this gravel road going out to an abandoned military facility where all the fences are busted down and you can go, not a big deal. But they would see these like 1950s cars come out of there that were like in perfect condition, like low mileage. And these MIB looking characters. And one particular time, she's still there, still runs a B&B. And she said that one particular time at this diner, one of them started glitching out. In fact, there were two guys and a woman, and they all seemed to be very like robotic MIB, dressed to the 1950s era. The woman had like the beehive hairdo, and she literally glitched out, a lot like Hillary Clinton has on from time to time, or other people, in politics, but where it literally looked as if, in her words, that there was a glitch with the operating system. And I remember she said that this lady with the beehive just kept like moving her head, trying to like recalibrate, and it wasn't happening. And so these two guys had to walk her off and put her back into the car and leave. And a ton of people saw it. So I don't know. I mean, this is more modern times, but yeah, the MIB thing just keeps coming up.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of these buzzwords and a lot of the things that I've spoken about this a couple of times on the show have alternate and double meanings. And the public thinks that it means one thing, but it actually means something completely different. It's like a psychological operation almost. When people have been programmed to hear certain words and they take those words literally, or to take those words in a different kind of way, like crash retrieval, like alien invasion. You know, alien takes on a completely different meaning when you just add one word in front of it. You just add illegal onto it, and it takes on a whole other meaning. And
Oh yeah.
it makes a lot more sense whenever they say that they're all around us and they've always been here when you put illegal in front of the word, because they are and they always have been. Right? And it takes on a different type of whole other meaning, and it's a literal meaning. And same with like crash retrieval. Crash retrieval can be anything. It can be a down satellite, it can be a down aircraft, it could be a military aircraft. And something that I've realized is it doesn't matter how much time has passed in between something crashing and it being discovered. So something could have been found that is hundreds and hundreds, or maybe even thousands of years old, and it becomes discovered, that would still be considered a crash retrieval. But the problem is that people within the community, whenever they hear the word crash retrieval, as it's related to UFOs and extraterrestrials, they think that it's something modern, right? They think that it's something that happened just recently, or that someone saw the craft go down and then they went to examine it or excavate it, or the military saw it on some kind of radar, or they got a call from another country to come and uh, grab an exotic craft that they don't know what it is. When it's possible that a crash retrieval could be something that was dug up in an archaeological dig in the Middle East that could
Mm-hmm.
be hundreds or thousands of years old. And that's what is interesting to me about the Bob Lazar case. Like, and a lot of people have different feelings about Bob Lazar, but one thing that was interesting that stuck out to me whenever he's telling his story is that he said that he was under the impression that at least one of the craft that he witnessed or that he worked on, he was under the impression that it was dug up, that it was found in a archaeological dig. And then when you look at the Wilson documents as well, now regardless if you think that the Wilson documents are real or fake, I personally believe that they're fake. Right? And some people would argue with that, especially Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan would put his life on the line to say that the Wilson documents are real, but John Greenwald Jr. has really disproven the whole Wilson documents. But it's interesting with the Wilson documents because it claims that they have possession, like the government has possession of a craft, but they're not sure what it is, and they think that it could fly. Well, putting the emphasis on that you think that it can fly and you think that it may be some sort of anti-gravity craft means that you never seen it actually do what it's supposed to be doing. No one witnessed what you thought, what you think that it can do. So where did it come from? And that come in my mind, I'm thinking, oh well, maybe it was dug up. Maybe a lot of these crafts that we think are coming from other worlds and other planets aren't coming from other worlds, or they're not coming from extraterrestrials. They're actually coming from the planet itself, and they're just old technology from a previous civilization or previous species that was here.
Yeah, it's a cluster because when it comes to intelligence, and I'm glad you mentioned the Wilson documents because you hear how Eric Davis was forced to meet with this guy Wilson in a parking lot, and I understand the reality, or at least what seems to be an apparent reality that Greenwald has debunked this. However, has he? And the reason I say that is, what better governmental loudspeaker or um, speaking piece than John Greenwald, where you can have him say whatever you want through a simple FOIA sent to his address. So I find that he is quite literally controlled opposition. You know, if there's anything they would like to cast doubt upon, it's very easy. The Freedom Information Act is very technical if you've looked at it, because misinformation and disinformation is legally accepted as information, and it can also be sent out if national security is involved. So he's the ultimate mouthpiece if you wanted to detract from any potential secretive behavior. By the same token, I argue that sometimes many of the same forces are controlling the more extreme. Oh, wow, something just flew by my window. I hope that was a bird. The more extreme, crazy stories in ufology. I argue that many times characters in the intelligence community are actually at both ends of this, sort of throwing up guardrails, you know, along the narrative that they would like, which is usually in the middle. And they don't want people to get too crazy on it. And if they do, they want to know who they are. And they don't want people to get too debunky on it. And if they do get super debunky, they want to know who they are, because those are also assets they can control in real time in other scenarios. And information and that data is quite literally, you know, the gold of disclosure, right? That's what you want to be able to, that is the currency of disclosure, is having people you can control or assets. And I would argue that a lot of people who claim to be uncontrollable are assets. And among those, you know, they don't know it in a lot of cases. So, you know, you're asking to debunk the Wilson documents, and you send a Freedom of Information Act request, and you get something back, and you read that as if it's gospel, when in reality you realize that we are kind of dealing with the two wings of the same bird. So you know,
what
it's
what
tough.
he had done though is he examined the actual stamp on the document. Though it wasn't that he read something, or the FOIA request came back and said that the document wasn't real. He was examining the stamp on the Wilson document, and he's seen that there was inconsistencies and incongruencies uh, that other documents don't have. So that the
Yeah.
stamp wasn't right on the Wilson document, like it's right on all the other documents that he has gotten in.
And
So
I'm
I don't
just
know,
gonna
it's an interesting thing working with documents and being able to spot something that could be fake, might not be fake. I mean, I just had
well, and that's
Richard.
the hard part, is you can get those stamps, like you can buy those stampers, like you can put it on anything, which is super crazy. I have a bunch of them. So like, and you know, you can get them, and you can either make an like you said, an illegitimate document look legitimate, or you could do the opposite, and you can do so after the fact. You could actually have a legitimate document, and then you could nail it with like one of these stampers, and that's just what it does. I'm sure you've seen them. You know, this one's True Dot, but you can get them from everywhere. And the government uses them quite often. It's sort of like the new version of the wax seal. Remember, like how people had the signet rings, and they would put the wax seal, like, oh, it's official. So, but yeah, 100%. I've seen that, and it's interesting, but it reminds me a lot, you know, of the, you know, when it comes to these quote unquote aliens, because in a lot of the documentation, as you said, the word alien is written everywhere in government documents. However, it's assumed, as you said, that it is people not of this country, which would technically qualify in all accounts, right? All you have to do is put illegal before that word, like you said, and you all of a sudden have like a whole new genre of you can say whatever you want, basically. And we find this with you know, many of the stories that revolve around Corso and the foreign technology desk. You know, ooh, foreign technology, it could be from out of this world. Yes, but it could also just be, you know, a couple thousand miles away. So in another country. So it's really difficult because I find that these vague terms are how a lot of the government documentation is passed back and forth, and people can basically say whatever they want to say and not be found out. And a really good example is UAP. You know, everybody was looking for UFO for decades, and they were using these other 3 letters thinking they were all spycraft. And yeah, lo and behold, it took a while for people to find out.
Yeah, and then I mean, there's a lot of proof of people just coming up with, doing fake documents. My friend Paul Knight did one for a April Fool's joke. He created a fake CIA document for one of his friends, exclaiming that the CIA was investigating this Facebook group. Looked really legit. And then a couple of years later, he sees that document, that fake document that he made, pop up on someone's YouTube channel, and they're taking it as truth. They're like, "Oh, here, look, this is really real. The CIA is investigating this Facebook group." I mean, and that's how easy it is. And I just had Richard Doty on the other day, and you've had him on a couple of times as well, and he was supplying fake documents to half of the freaking UFO community.
Yeah,
I mean,
all
that's how.
part of the job description. Yeah, with Linda Moulton Howe, and right,
Yeah,
and it's like, here, does this pass the sniff test?
yeah.
And it's amazing, man. You know, the alien thing with them walking among us. Have you looked at all into organic robotoids? Have you looked into that?
No, what is that?
So there was this guy, a Dr. Peter David Beater, who was this authoritative source up until the point where he came out with this. He was
Wait, 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 wait,
100%.
wait. His name is Peter Beater?
Yeah, I swear. Dr. Peter David Beater, and
Peter
some people
Beater.
call him Peter David Better, but I like Beater. And
Doc,
he,
Peter Beater at your service.
yeah, super respected though. Like it's weird. He was like this way respected doctor. Everything he said was gospel, and then he came out with this theory about organic robotoids, which was like synthetic humans, and he lost all credibility at that point. But there's some pretty interesting, stuff out there about these synthetic organisms. And I think it was like in the same year the iPhone came out, there was a new article that came out about the progress and how they have created these synthetic organisms that literally are like living robots. They call them xenobots. And this didn't come out again until about in the 2020s, like maybe 2021. And these xenobots, go figure, right after 2020, but these xenobots are a type of programmable organism made from frog cells, and they basically replicate by spontaneously gathering up loose stem cells, and so they can self-replicate. But this is it's weird, like this whole organic robotoid. It's something you have to check out because it sounds a lot like some of these MIBs basically glitching out, like what we were talking about before, where they look sort of alien, but they're human. They glitch out. They're not really, they are biological, but they're also robotic, and they have a limited shelf life. Yeah, I don't know. It reminds me of the movie Multiplicity, where they can like almost pull it off, but not quite, right? Like there's something wrong with the clone. But I don't know. They're NPCs basically. But that's something you got to check out is Peter Beater.
Peter Beater, Dr. Peter Beater. Got to get him on, bro. Get on that Peter Beater. No, but I think that there is something to that. If it's not straight up clones, then it's like human cybernetics, human like cyborgs or something like that. I mean, they've had to have had that technology for a really long time. I mean, I got no proof, no evidence, just personal thought in theory, but they would definitely have to have some sort, because what better way to run an operation and not let people know exactly what you're doing than bring in a cyborg or bring in some sort of non-biological mixed with biological entity, because then you can get away with whatever you want then, do whatever you want then, because there would be nobody to blow the whistle. You just throw them into a trash compactor and that's it. Or you flip on, turn off their off switch, and boom, it's done. You've gotten away with whatever it is, whatever kind of operation, whatever kind of maybe even assassination that you wanted to do, and no one has to go to jail. The perpetrator, there's no consequences.
Mm-hmm. And what's strange about that is there are images from this same era, and this is going back. I mean, these are not, in the 2000s. We're talking about older stuff where there is like older images, black and white images of people working on these, allegedly at DARPA. There's actually quite. I mean, you could fill like a banker's box of all the ones I've seen. Some of them look faker than others, but they usually have more or less along the back, like a seam or a zipper, and that's where everything is accessed. And it seems far fetched, but then again, I mean, you look at these, these robots by SpaceX or Elon, the Tesla robots. And I mean, I know people that have orders for those who are like waiting for like to receive those. And first of all, I think they have entirely too much money, but who the hell would want this in their home? And I know people that have ordered this and they're like literally waiting for this robot to show up at their house, and it can do everything they are alleging. It can clean up, it can take out garbage, it can do all this stuff. And if you threw a silicone suit on it, could you really tell? That it is a robot. I don't think we could. And I don't know entirely that we realize how long this has been going on. And if it's been going on an extremely long time, then it should be, by all intents and purposes, perfected by now. Like you said, you don't need to do certain things because you can just fire one of these up and have it done for you.
Well, have you heard of the Furby conspiracy?
No, let's hear this. I love it.
Well, apparently it had something to do with the NSA, and the NSA was putting in these listening devices into all of the Furbies. And all the Furbies were collecting all of this data and all this information about all the households that the Furbies were in the late 90s into the early 2000s, because Furbies were super freaking popular. And then when you think of, well, I just watched this documentary on Netflix called The American Conspiracy, the octopus murders. Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I talked to a guy that knows not only the guy that came out with the documentary, but knew the guy who was killed in the hot tub. I believe his name was Dan, and he kind of went into detail about this scenario and what they really knew and how the software, this was out. Way back then, this software was out there that was, it falls right into line with a lot of the conspiracies out there that we have, software or basically 0-point quantum computing that they claim doesn't exist, but that it is in fact around. And it kind of makes sense because we have these huge data centers popping up everywhere that look like Fort Knox and have, security that far outweighs the security of banks, even because they say data is the new gold. And yet we are expected to believe that all these, for lack of a better word, listening centers, right, private and governmental, are basically collecting data for the time when we have this quantum computing available to go through it all instantaneously and without any real return on investment. But, the argument is that we have had, this software around, and I think that kind of touches on it a little bit. But no, I haven't seen the documentary yet. I need to watch it. Did you get a chance to watch it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So basically what happened was that this gentleman was the software engineer and software company signed a contract with the Department of Defense to create this data software to track criminals and like track court cases and bring certain relating factors from different cases all together to like cross-examine them. And the Department of Justice ended up bankrupting his entire company and stopped paying him and stole the software. Well, it turns out that they put a back door into the software in order for them to collect all the data from that the software was presenting to people, and they would sell that software to different countries' intelligence communities. So then the United States had access to all of the other intelligence communities in all the different countries that they sold the software to. One of the first people that they sold it to was Canada. So they had the access to whatever Canada was using the software to do. The United States government had access to figure out what it is that they were using the software for as well. And it eventually spread out to almost every country. Well, not every country, but a lot of different countries. So it was basically setting up the United States was setting up a surveillance world. And then what do we get? What's the next evolving thing from that, right? What do we start getting in the early 2000s? Cell phones, right? Listening devices, data collection.
Mm-hmm.
So they spread it out because they were not only selling it to their enemies, but they were also selling the software to their allies as well. They're like, okay, well, how do we do this on a grander scale? How do we get people like the individual, everyday, personal, person? Like, how do we get them with that? Well, we'll give them all cell phones. Right? That's not in the documentary, but that's just my thought process of the evolving nature of it. They don't have to do that anymore. They don't have to create a software and sell it to a different country to spy on them. They already have the spy. Everyone's already got the spy software in their hands, in their pocket. So that's what the dots that I was connecting from watching the documentary, and because that was what started 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The whole software was called Promise. It's called Promise Software.
You should talk to his name is Dr. A. True Ott, and he was actually dealing with this stuff, and he's had a really interesting career doing different things, and he knows a lot of interesting people in Washington. And this particular story shocked him, that it made Netflix. Basically, he was shocked that it was in the public domain. And I can see why, because there is, also this project called Pegasus, not the one with Basiago, not the time travel thing.
Not the secret space program, time traveling super soldier one.
Well, and I should not say that it's not connected, but there is a project called Pegasus, which is a spyware developed by an NSO group. And as of March of last year, as of 1 year ago, it's called Pegasus. And they said that Pegasus operators could remotely install spyware on anybody's cell phone with a 0-click exploit. So that just means all you need is their phone number, and you can install this spyware. And like you said, it's been utilized by law firms, courtrooms, etc. And you no longer have to do like, the 1970s, oh, I've got a chip and we'll stick it in the back of the FM transmitter and all that stuff. You can literally just purchase, for lack of a better word, Pegasus from NSO Group, which is literally it's an Israeli cyber arms company with ties to the CIA. And many argue that it is the CIA and they're just doing business through NSO Group to covertly kind of hide who's in control. But people have known that with Mossad for a long time. But yeah, all you need is somebody's phone number, and you can remotely install this spyware, and you can look it up. It's out there, and people still don't believe that we are all being listened to. It's crazy.
Well, that's another thing that they do too, Ryan, is that they try and hide legitimate, real program names under like fantasy things. It's another misdirection. It's just like the buzzwords have alternate meanings as well. Well, the names of these programs also have alternate meanings too. I mean, we've seen that with Operation Looking Glass, like people talking about that this is, people in the community are like, oh, Project Looking Glass was a project to see into the future and see what events are going to happen in the future and see back in time. And then there's 4 of them. All Russia's got one, Germany's got one, the United States got one. There's one just floating around in space or whatever. Well, Operation Looking Glass is a real operation, but it was to put a nuclear command post in space. It's the same with the Stargate project. Everyone in the community. Oh, the Stargate project was a time traveling a 20 and back portal that would take you into space and then age regress you and then all this stuff. And then, well, no, Stargate project was a real government program for remote viewing and psychic ability as a data collection program. It's the same with this Pegasus thing that you're talking about. We have the hairy-fairy mystical nonsense that people think that these programs actually are, and then there's the real program, which is a way to cover up with the mystical nonsense, hairy-fairy stuff, is a way to cover up the real thing. That's the way that I look at it anyway. Because if you have people talking about a bunch of fairy tale nonsense, then the real thing can just be swept up underneath the rug and no one will ever know about it because they're all convinced that it's something completely different. It's the exact same thing with the words that we were just talking about 20 minutes ago. It's the exact 100%. Same thing. It's a misdirection. It's misdirection and misinformation, disinformation, and deception. That's what Richard Doty called it. Deception operation, right? It's a deception is what it is.
What better way to hide everything in plain sight that when you look up something like Project Looking Glass, or when you look up something like Project Pegasus, it takes you to a crazy time travel conspiracy rabbit hole, and it doesn't tell you about this covert spyware that's being used by almost every country to listen on its people. And of course, this stuff is very real. You can look it up. You can look up the NSO Group. You can look up Pegasus spyware. And, the craziest thing about it is they've been trying to find out a way, this is where it gets really scary, to detect. They can't even detect if it's on your phone. Like they're trying to look, and it was, what's wild about that is January of this year, 2024, Kaspersky Labs said in a press release that they think they found a way to detect it. And you have to basically, it's only effective if the device is rebooted the same day that it's installed. And the only way that you can detect it is through digital forensics. So, I mean, it's virtually undetectable. They can download it remotely. And a bunch of countries, claim, oh, well, this is being used against criminals and terrorists. And the bottom line is it's like you said, it's anybody with a cell phone, and they can target, anybody they want, and then they can get them to either play ball or control them in some way, because it is tied to the justice and legal systems.
Yeah, and it serves as the best cover up. That's why I believe that the whole alien and extraterrestrial thing is a cover up, but not in the way that people think that it's a cover up. I think it's another misdirection and another deception. Because if you got people believing in space aliens and extraterrestrials, then it paves a way to cover up advanced military technology, advanced military drones, and what technology we might actually have. And that, to me, is the real reason for the buzzword national security threat. It's not a national security threat because there's extraterrestrials. It's a national security threat because if other countries find out that it's our technology, then we're exposed. And they know it. That's why the buzzword is used as national security threat. See, it has an alternate meaning. It has a different meaning than what people assume that it actually means. And normally it's the most logical and critical thing that you can think of. But the intelligence communities have ufology and a lot of these groups thinking that it's something different, that they're right whenever they're actually wrong, and they've been telling us the truth the entire time. Deception, right? Deception after deception, tricking people into believing that it's kind of like gaslighting in a way, sort of, like you see something and they tell you that you didn't see it, even though that you see. There's a relation there between, they're doing a little gaslighting there as well. So it's like, well, what's going on? And when you go and you examine these words and you take the critical thought process and the common sense behind exactly what they're saying, it's completely different than what our preconceived notions and our preconceived thoughts due to the programming of this community wants us to believe.
Yeah, it's weird because I find that a lot of these pathways, whether they be intelligence oriented or like the physical nuts and bolts aspects like technology, that they have such a massive bandwidth that sometimes they tend to backfire among these working groups. And what I mean by that is it's a lot like magic, right? It's a lot like magic itself, where you have like this sorcerer of the magic of the black magic cult of whatever, and he has to be careful because there's always the ability for someone else to utilize this sorcery against them. And I think it's the same with technology. It's with these technical details, it is a lot like a magical circumstance, because it's backfired. And not to go back too much on the Project Pegasus stuff, but do you remember when Saudi Arabia got caught like murdering that guy in the embassy, Jamal Khashoggi, where
Yes.
they like hacked into pieces and it was all caught on his iWatch? Well, that project, that's Pegasus spyware, was used by Saudi Arabia to spy on Jamal Khashoggi. That's how they found everything out about it and why they lured him into the embassy to do what they did. And then, by a strange twist of fate, his iWatch, again, technology, caught it all, started recording for EMS services, and sort of threw him under the bus. So I argue that technology and magic and really this information and disinformation is sort of it's a catch-22. It's a double-edged sword. It goes both ways. So it's going to be interesting how this is used in the future, especially with AI and our freedoms disappearing at a very quick rate.
Yeah, and also with technology, it's like we're not going to get anything publicly that can't be dual use, that they can't use in some sort of nefarious way. They're not going to give us any kind of technology that can't be used against us. Just like, with the promise software, they're putting a backdoor into the software. And that was in the late 80s into the early 90s, and it's like, well, what all has advanced since then, and what have they been doing? If they were doing that then, and see people like to say, oh, well, that was back then. There's no way that they're doing anything like that now. Just like with the MK Ultra programs, when you bring it up to normal, everyday people, that aren't in this community, you tell them about that the CIA was doing mind control experiments in the early 50s into the 70s. They'll be like, oh, well, that was back then. They're not doing that anymore. You know what I mean? And I think that that's really the way that it works. They have to kind of there reaches like a period of time where the kind of the NDA is expired on it, because there's been enough time pass in between it where they kind of have to come in and be like, oh yeah, well, we were doing this 30 years ago, but magically we're not doing it anymore, right? So it's like to let the public be aware, but then it's like the public just kind of brushes it off as like a one-time thing, which makes zero sense. I mean, the project, the Promise software was very successful, and with it being very successful, it would need to change and evolve, right? And that's another thing with like the Stargate project. I've done a deep dive into the remote viewing. I've read all the documents and done a lot of research into that. And that program worked. Regardless if the CIA said that no intelligence data was ever collected, the evolving nature of remote viewing, there's another step to it. There's another application that it can be used for. And the way that other programs have worked, you look at it and you're like, okay, well, they're definitely still doing it. They're definitely still using that technology, but it's just a different kind of application. That's the way that I feel about the remote viewing programs. That's the way I feel about this Promise software. That's how I feel about really anything that has success and works. They're going to continue doing it, but it's just going to be continued with a different application in mind. Then it's going to be named something completely different, just like the change from flying saucers into UFOs, from UFOs to UAPs, from UAPs to USOs. It's switching of the name of what you call it, so therefore anything that came before it can't really be lumped into the same category. It's something completely different.
What are your thoughts on? It's kind of shocking. It's cool that you had Rick Doty on, because he claims there is a new version, right, of this remote viewing that is more technical. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was kind of shocked whenever he told me that, because I thought that I had came to that conclusion on my own. Like, I don't listen to other people. I don't really listen to other people's shows. I get all my information. It feels like it comes from me. Now, people can say whatever they want, but it's normally through research and looking into things and reading, right? And then I formulate my own conclusions and my own ideas based off of the things that I look into. And I'd come to that conclusion early on through reading through all the Stargate documents, all the remote viewing documents, the SRI documents, the DIA documents, the Army intelligence documents. And I was like, okay, well, they definitely kept going with this. But it's speculation. It's just theory and idea. And I brought that up to a few of the remote viewers that were officially a part of the Stargate program, and a few of them kind of agreed with me, and a few of them just completely shut me down immediately. So I kind of just really stopped talking about it, because I just hit a dead end with it. And then when he brought it up in our interview, I was like, because someone made a comment, they were like, Doty claims that they called it something else. It started with an A. It
Yeah,
was like
TPA.
TPA, yes.
Mhm.
And I had never heard that before, and I brought the comment up on the screen, and Doty commented on it. And I was like, that's really interesting because it sounds like remote influencing. Sounds like implanting thoughts and ideas and beliefs into someone's head remotely and being able to control them, not even being in the same area as them. And Lynn Buchanan, which I've had on my show quite a few times now, says that it's 100% possible. And I can prove that it's possible because I have documentation telling people how to do it. So I know that it's real. And that would be the next step that I could feasibly see them going in after the Stargate program got shut down, which was all about data collection on foreign targets, retrieving information, getting information, and giving it back to the intelligence community. Regardless if they used it or not, it was still an application of it. And I was like, well, this remote influencing would be the next logical step in the evolving nature of remote viewing. And I was like, that program sounds like remote influencing, which Doty called it, something different. But I was like, those were my exact same thoughts. So I was kind of mind blown in that he was told, I believe, by a general. He said it in our interview that a general told him that that's pretty much what the program was, and that it's ran by the CIA. And that's another thing that I immediately thought as well. I was like, well, why would the CIA shut down this program in 95 when they had all this success with it? Right. And the only two options that I came to the conclusion of was, one, they already had a program, and two, they found a different application for it. And that different application for it, they couldn't carry over the people that was already in that program into a new program that does something that involves remote viewing, but not what they're used to. So, theory, speculation that they shut down that program to open up a remote influencing program or a remote control program. Lynn Buchanan calls it both. Remote control. It's essentially what it is. It's putting thoughts and ideas and beliefs inside of your head. And Lynn Buchanan was actually approached with asking him if he could kill somebody with his mind. And I was like, holy shit! If you can do assassinations remotely, what a skill! What a skill! Like, you can raise someone's blood pressure to such a level that they have a heart attack and die. Would that not be something, if you were an intelligence community, would that not be something that you would want to do? But then Lynn was like, well, I kind of came to this conclusion on my own. He didn't outright say this, but I was like, oh, well, what would be, because that kind of seems a little redundant and kind of unclimactic just to give someone a heart attack and kill them, right? What you would want to do is remotely influence someone else to commit the assassination or the killing for you, because that's way more, that gives a much bigger upheaval. That's a political upheaval when someone does, when there's like a victim and there's like a culprit for it. If you're just outright, you know killing people with your mind, then it's like, I think Dr. David Morehouse put it this way, or maybe it was Shane the Ruiner. He was like, oh, well, it's kind of like Osama bin Laden just dying in a cave. That's not exciting, right? You want SEAL Team 6 going in there and taking him out. Like, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. It is that TPA. Rick, the amazing thing about Rick Doty is for all the shade that people throw at him, when you hit him with a lot of those hard questions, it becomes obvious that he really does know, things that others don't. And to be completely honest, he's saved, I can't go into it, but he's saved my tail in the past. And he was telling me about, well, similar to like the Stargate project, where you have a project shut down and then it's renamed or repackaged or rebranded. There was an LLC that was trying to basically have me sign some stuff. And through a mutual friend, I reached out to Rick, and he, in so many words, he said, well, that LLC has 38 sub LLCs, and I've worked with them a long time, and basically run, like, don't sign. And it's in times like those that you realize that Rick really does know his stuff. And it makes you wonder, with things like remote viewing and TPA, how different is it really, as you've said, than, way back when you look at the work of like John Dee and his Imperial Vision, utilizing magic and the Enochian language to basically, tell the British Crown, just wait. I think a storm is going to come and it's going to sink all of these ships, and we don't even have to engage. We can go in and clean up afterwards. And like you said, it's implanting, right, that into the universe, into the universal consciousness, basically alchemically planting those seeds and waiting for the evidence of what takes place afterwards. And how different is remote viewing TPA from actually, it's rebranded, it's renamed, but how different is it really from, going and seeing, a woman with a crystal ball, or looking at the works of John Dee? These are all areas where you have laboratories like Pear, Monroe Institute, the list goes on, where, this stuff has been studied and funded by the government for a long time. And as you said, at the end, they always say, oh, there's no data, no proof, but they sure keep funding it. So it makes you wonder what's going on. They just rebrand, rename, repackage, and refund, and keep that shell game moving, because that's the big thing. They don't connect the dots. It's always destroy one, and then, oh, look, we have this other project, or we have this other LLC, or we have this other deal going on. And we see that in so many different forms that it really makes you wonder, what is really taking place.
Well, that's how people hide and keep from getting in trouble, is they have multiple companies. Other companies own other companies. There's 20 different, and it makes it so complicated and difficult to figure out what's going on. So they're perfectly hidden. And I mean, it's genius, but it's evil genius,
It is. It's literally magic, because just the word corporation, just think about that. Limited liability corporation, or LLC. A corporation is basically an entity without a corpse, an entity without a body, that you are magically creating, that can own things, do business, stash cash. And it makes you wonder, it is literally magic. This maritime law included a bunch of spell work in the spelling of the words that we use in our legal system. And I think corporation is an excellent one, because it's necromancy. It's a dead entity that isn't alive, but it's able to function as a living, breathing human being. And you can't do anything to it because it has limited liability. It's not there. So what are we creating? It's like creating a bunch of little, whether you want to call them homunculus, or creating a bunch of little golems, or you're basically creating these little entities that aren't human, don't exist, but they are accomplishing, as you said, in a lot of cases, a lot of evil things without any repercussions.
That's right, and that is the way that it is done. And through all the name changes, the name switches, the funding coming from multiple directions, and the mis and disinformation, and deception operations that's been ran, it's becomes increasingly difficult at every turn to get to the bottom of anything, not even just in the communities that we're associated with, but just in anything, whatever it is that you want to figure out. It's just as difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But Ryan, thanks so much, brother, for coming on. Really appreciate your time this evening. It was a wonderful conversation. Can you let people know where to find you online?
100%. Just look for Hero Paranormal. It's on YouTube, on social media, or you can just go to HeroParanormal.com. And I have a little science project up in the Uinta Basin of Utah, and that's called Space Wolf Research. Same thing, social media or spacewolfresearch.com.
All the links to Ryan's information will be in the description of this video. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. All of my links are also in the description of this video. Try and subscribe on all the different podcast platforms, because there is an audio only version of this show that you can listen to at any time on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, and anywhere else that you listen to podcast on. All right, guys, thanks so much for being here. Thanks everyone in the chat, and we will see you guys next time.